technically speaking, we haven't truly entered phase two of the banana zone yet. We've just picked up the banana again.
That's right. It'll be when Bitcoin breaks its new highs, which I think is probably next week, because we get to the top, we consolidate a bit, and then it goes, and then everything goes. And the banana zone really won't kick in the terms of the way that people think, where everybody's getting hilariously rich and all sorts of stuff, probably until Solana breaks all-time highs. Because that's people's biggest bag, really, is Solana.
Yep.
And that needs to happen. Then risk gets recycled out the curve, because people do simple maths, and everybody's going to do it. Oh, they start saying, okay, maybe Bitcoin goes to 300,000 this cycle, let's say. So therefore, it's got a 3x from here. And then they're like, oh, but Solana could do a 5x from here, and Sui could do a 10x from here. And before you know it, everybody rushes out the risk curve, because it's later in the cycle and they want to capture as much gains as possible. What's funny to me is we've kind of proven that liquidity is 90% of the price movement of crypto and 97.5% of the NASDAQ. So it is the dominant macro factor, but people don't want to believe it. And because like global M2 leads by 3 months, what happened is in Q4, global liquidity was draining because the dollar went up and rates went up and etc. And so that has the knock-on effect in Q1. And then what everybody does is apply narrative in Q1. It's the tariffs, the world's f***ed, we're going to recession. It was nothing to do with that. It was just the liquidity. So it's kind of like, yeah, it was this easy. Now, what it will do, it will decouple at some point. And normally it decouples in the bull phase of the cycle and then the full bear phase, because that's when fear and greed take over. And like the FOMO part of it is when network adoption increases massively. And it starts breaking away from M2, which is why it only has a 90% correlation, not 100%. So I think we'll see that now. And it's just saying now is, if this continues to play out, it's just banana zone from now until July. And then we've had, if we've got to think 3 months in advance. So what we've had is the dollar correcting the last couple of weeks, rates correcting. So we should see the market correct in August.
Yeah.
And maybe it's as simple as that. And that would be very consistent with previous cycles as well. Everyone's scratching their head saying, why has gold been doing so well and crypto hasn't? And I thought, I know there's going to be a simple answer to this. It's not going to be some complex thing. And in the last GMI, I figured out that all gold does is follow financial conditions, which lead. So it's kind of real time. And then crypto follows with a 3-month lag. So it's like, oh, I get it now. So gold is just representing the fact that financial conditions, and we define financial conditions as the dollar, rates, and oil. Those are the kind of big daddies of it. Once they start moving, gold moves. So gold has been correcting somewhat because they've started to correct. And so gold is actually leading this because it just is real-time financial conditions, while Bitcoin and crypto and NASDAQ is just lagged by 3 months. It's as simple as that. And I can't believe it. I put out a tweet at the actual peak of Bitcoin dominance and said, I think dominance has peaked. I think it has. It's the right point in the cycle. It's this part in the banana zone when it happens. It usually happens after this first correction. So if that's right, and let's say Bitcoin goes from 100K to 150K for easy maths, then if you look at the performance of the other tokens, you can kind of impute what happens is that Sui probably does 3x that. So Bitcoin dominance, generally when it falls, it is the start of the silly season. I mean, that's, obviously, by definition, it means that other tokens are outperforming Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin's going up, which we're still going up, then what we should see is that. So I think, we've had a little correction in Bitcoin dominance, went from 62 back to 63. It'll top out again and then move lower. And that next move, people will really start to see it. And I think that's the move when Bitcoin goes through all-time highs and everything else goes completely bananas. So here's the same kind of period in 2021. So it happened in Jan that time around.
Yeah.
That drop went from 70-something% down to 38% in a few months.
That's crazy.
Right, that's alt season. We saw it here back in 2017, which I think is a very similar one. It started like in Feb 17. That went from 95 to 35.
Yeah.
What's interesting is Bitcoin dominance over time is falling. So the peaks are always less.
lower
seem
highs.
yeah, the lows seem to be roughly equal, but it suggests to us that we should come somewhere back down here, and it happens fast. It happens in 2, 3, 4 months. I mean, my bet has been, as you know, has been SWI, because it's outperformed everything.
Yeah,
it just keeps going up, correcting, going up, correcting, going up, correcting. So it does all the right things. It outperforms all of the time. And I don't see any reason why that's going to stop. I mean, people argue a lot about, well, low free float, VC tokens. People don't understand a simple fact is that a low free float in a bull market goes up more. Yeah. Anybody who's ever traded emerging markets knows this. And that's what happens. And in a bear market, they get killed more. It's as simple as that, because you've got less available supply and a lot of demand, because there's a lot of attention on SWI and other things like this. And so it tends to work really, really well. This is the Solana SWI chart. If I look at it on a weekly basis, it broke out of this basing pattern. It flagged, consolidated. My guess is the next move breaks through all of this. And so that tells us that SWI is still the fastest horse in the race.
Yeah.
ETH, different question, because I think can play catch up. But if we look at this, it just looks like it's flagging here again. And the next move is again the move where we should see a dramatic outperformance of SWI versus SOL. And that's, I really simplify everything, because if we've got one dominant factor, and the dominant factor being liquidity, therefore everything is correlated. So therefore, just do one chart against the other and choose the strongest asset without going too far out the risk curve. But basically, this is a flag pattern. When this goes, ETH has its next move up, wherever it goes to. That's a shocking chart if this plays out, because it will change everybody's narrative again about ETH. I still think ETH from here, could it outperform Solana? It's possible. It's possible. Just because what I think is coming is, as the financial system comes, you don't get fired for building on ETH. My idea is ETH is Microsoft. I've never been to a bank, an insurance company, a large corporate that has Apple Macs. It's all on Microsoft. Why? Because it's an operating system that everybody can use, and you can hire people, fire people, bring in new people, and they don't have to learn something new. But if you were to build the entire financial system on SWI, everyone has to learn a move language. There's less number of developers. It's not had the Lindy effects that ETH has. Now, also the banks love a layer 2, because they feel like they've got control over certain things, but it still has the finality of settlement to the layer 1. So I think ETH is probably going to shock people going forwards. But, XRP looks like it will too, and so does Doge. So it's kind of like everything's correlated.
Yeah.
But if we can break that high, if we can break that, let's say 4,300 high, it's going to really explode. I think we do have an NFT season.
Yeah.
Somewhat different than the last. I think what we're seeing is a current bifurcation. One is Web3 consumer-based brands being built. And, we'll talk about what you guys are doing.
Yep.
But, that's Doodles, Pudgy Penguins, all of that, right? And that still seems to be capturing mind share. Then we've got the art side, which seems to be doing well. Then we've got the PFP side, which, there are a few projects that will survive. And Punks, going to the hands of Mickey Malko, is a good friend of mine, is amazing news. I managed to get the head of the SWI Foundation over drinks one night in Dubai at 11 o'clock at night to get a punk. I said, the reality is you cannot be in the space and having been reasonably successful without owning a punk, right? It's like, it's a rite of passage. Yeah. And so, I think punks probably get to a floor price of $500,000 this cycle, just because there's a lot of OGs who haven't yet bought them. I know we've talked about this in the past. I think Crypto Dick Butts is another one. You're either an OG and understand it, or you don't. And there's only 5,600 of them there. They're 1 ETH, 1 ETH 25. I just do not see a world that these are not 10 ETH, because they're so important to the space. Because you kind of know, right? Everybody's got a dick butt. You're like, yeah, you get this space. It's like a mini punk.
Yeah.
So I do think we'll see PFP projects maintaining value, certain ones that have Lindy effects. And I think that's good too. I think what Xcopy has done is so amazing, because he's got such a broad spread of assets that people can buy, from Max Payne and Friends as a PFP, which is cheap, through to the one of ones, and people can participate throughout his ecosystem. So I do think the art stuff continues as well. So, and then we're going to see somebody do something breakout, which is somewhere between I still think a hybrid idea behind memes and what NFTs actually use as technology. People aren't using NFT technology much yet. They're just using it still for pictures, but there's a lot I think will happen. So I think the NFT space is going to get interesting. And I think some of it will be on Solana. We've seen a bunch of stuff migrate across to Sui as well, because they're faster throughputs, so they're more like memes in that way. But we'll also see stuff accrue on ETH. So I think it's a broad mix. If we go back to the financial way of looking at it, if we think that chart of ETH might play out, which it breaks through the 4,300 level and then accelerates to 10K and beyond, right? So let's say ETH can triple from here or more, because if Bitcoin dominance is falling, and we think Bitcoin could go to 250 or 300, whatever the number, you choose your number, then ETH should outperform it. Money in ETH gets recycled into the ETH economy. So therefore the NFTs, even if they double, let's say ETH goes up 4x. If NFTs double, you might get an 8x on your trade. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Now, if you've got something like Meebs or crypto dick butts that are 1 ETH, could they go to 5? Could they even go to 10 in a full, FOMO cycle? Yes. Okay, now you're talking some huge money. That's what people forget. And you and I have talked about this in the past. People forget about NFTs versus meme coins is NFTs have this multiplier effect.
Yeah.
They're a call option on that underlying chain. I've kind of raised this a lot on Twitter to try and see where the pulse is, and people hate NFTs. They don't understand them. They don't really get it. And that makes me very interested.
Yeah. Because
there is a Lindy effect of what survived will survive and thrive. We know what the Lindy effect is. Like Xcopy is Lindy effect. Beeple is Lindy effect. A bunch of the generative art Lindy effect, and a bunch of these PFPs Lindy effects. So it's like, I love that second cycle trade where they get jammed down and you see what's got Lindy effect. Those things tend to wildly outperform. How I've done it to justify how is like, my big macro thesis is this space is a $3 trillion space today. I think it goes to $100 trillion in 10 years. That's just standard network adoption extrapolated out on the log chart. That's 97 trillion of wealth. That's the largest, fastest accumulation of wealth in all recorded history. It's the same, it's more, it's like 3x more than all of the Russian billionaires, all the Chinese billionaires, all of Silicon Valley wealth, and all the Wall Street billionaires added together times 3 or something stupid, right? All happening within a short period. Let's assume I'm an idiot and it goes to 50 trillion, not 100. 47 trillion is still bigger than all of that wealth. And wealth gets recycled into art in the end. So if you speak to a friend of mine, Tad Smith, who used to run Sotheby's, Tad said the average billionaire has like 4 or 5 houses. Beyond that, you can't buy anything. So what happens is the value of the art in their houses is 10x the value of their house. Because art is a store of value, it's exchangeable, it's transportable. It's actually a very, very good store of wealth. So I'm just thinking as a long-term bet, by 10 years, some of these X copies will have traded at $200 million. We will see record prices in art in this space.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a bunch of people experimenting with, yet again, token-based economies based around IP and stuff. You're doing it. You kind of backed into it the other way round. The others have done it the other way. Nobody's yet to get it right. But all of our thesis is somehow this should connect to an ecosystem in a way that works. So whether Doodles can pull it off, whether you guys pull it off, I don't know, but somebody's going to get there. We just don't know the mechanism to accrue value to the token in a way that does it, whether it's via buybacks or whether it's via opportunity sets or loyalty points or whatever. We keep creating these token economies and they keep failing because there's an airdrop, people then just dump it. There's no real use for the token and then it gets forgotten. So I don't even know why people do it most of the time, because the actual founding team don't retain much of it. The thing falls 90% afterwards.
And you have a liability. Yeah.
What have you done? What have you done that's added any value? I love what you're doing, and I love that you're pushing it hard to try and do it, because somebody's going to get this right.
Yeah, somebody's going to get it right.
It's the same with the creator economy. It's the same with sports teams. It's the same with brands. Somebody's going to crack this, and the whole thing is going to fucking explode. Whether it's this cycle, we get the first look at it, then we get the Lindy effect, and then after that is the big one. But it's coming. I know it is. Been part of my core thesis. So I love how you guys are experimenting. The Doodles one, does that work? I don't know, but they have. I mean, I caught up with Austin the other day. They have a lot of ideas of what they want to do to create true value from it. So it's not just a meme coin in itself. Meme coins is okay. I don't have an issue with it. But really, if somebody can figure out how to make an economy, then we've got something big, really big.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Market Chronicles, your shortcut to understanding what's really moving the crypto markets. This is episode 22. And hey, if you're watching us over on YouTube, definitely hit that subscribe button. Helps us out. And you won't miss these deep dives. The crypto space moves incredibly fast. It's easy to get lost in the noise. So today we're cutting through that. We're going to analyze some recent thoughts from Raoul Pal, pull out the key insights, and hopefully help you navigate what's happening right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Raoul's been talking quite a bit about this idea he calls the banana zone. It's interesting because he's saying we're not quite in it the full sort of mania phase yet. It's more like we're picking up the banana again, getting ready.
Okay, so a preparatory phase. What's the trigger then? What kicks off phase 2, according to him?
Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin breaking its previous all-time highs. He thinks that could actually happen pretty soon, maybe even next week. After this recent consolidation we've had.
Right, Bitcoin breaking out gets the ball rolling. But what about that wider feeling of real wealth creation, the thing that gets everyone excited?
That seems to be tied more to Solana, in his view. He suggests Solana breaking its own all-time high could be the real catalyst for that broad market exuberance.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? A lot of people hold Solana. It's a big part of many portfolios. So that breakthrough feels significant.
Okay, Bitcoin leads. Solana ignites the main event. Got it. He also brought up something called risk curve recycling. What's that about?
Yeah, that's a classic late cycle behavior. You see investors basically moving further out along the risk curve. They're trying to maximize their potential returns. So he gave an example, like maybe Bitcoin gives you a 3x from here to, say, $300,000 hypothetically. But maybe Solana offers a potential 5x, and then something newer, like Sui. Maybe that looks like a potential 10x.
So people start chasing those bigger multiples further down the line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That hunt for higher gains pushes money into, well, riskier assets. Makes sense. Now, another huge point he hammers home is liquidity. He sees it as the dominant macro factor.
He really does. The numbers he uses are pretty stark, something like 90% of crypto price movement, and get this 97.5% for the NASDAQ is just down to liquidity.
Wow.
Yeah. And he points to global M2, the money supply, as a leading indicator, but with about a 3-month lag. So, for instance, that liquidity drain we saw in Q4, dollar up, rates up, that hit the market in Q1.
Right, but people are talking about tariffs or recession fears then.
Exactly. He argues those are often just narratives pinned onto what's fundamentally a liquidity shift. Now, he does say there's decoupling sometimes, like in the peak bull phase or deep bear markets. That's where, fear and greed, network adoption effects can temporarily override that M2 correlation. That's why it's 90%, not 100%.
Okay, so where does that leave us now, liquidity-wise?
Well, based on current trends, he thinks this sort of banana zone setup could continue until maybe July. But, because the dollar and rates have corrected a bit recently, he's also flagging a potential market correction around August, kind of mirroring previous cycles.
Interesting. So a potential summer rally followed by an August dip. What about gold? He mentioned a connection there too.
Yeah, his take is pretty simple on that. Gold basically tracks financial conditions, dollar, rates, oil, more or less in real time.
Okay.
Whereas crypto and the NASDAQ too tend to lag those same conditions by about 3 months.
So gold's recent correction could be a leading indicator for crypto down the line.
That's the idea. It gives you a potential heads up maybe 3 months out.
Got it. And Bitcoin dominance. Where does he see that going?
He thinks it's likely peaked already, or is very close to peaking. This peak usually happens during that banana zone phase, often after maybe an initial market correction.
And the implication of that peak is?
Alt season, or silly season, as some call it. Basically, the start of a period where other tokens, the altcoins, begin to seriously outperform Bitcoin. We saw dominance drop sharply in 2021, went from over 70% down to like 38% in months. And back in 2017, it went from, 95% down to 35%?
Huge shifts.
Yeah, and the trend generally seems to be that these peaks are getting lower over time. So maybe more room for alts going forward.
Okay, so if Bitcoin dominance is potentially topping out, which alts look interesting from his perspective?
He specifically highlighted Sui, called it the fastest horse, consistently outperforming.
Why Sui?
Part of it seems to be its low free float. Less of the total supply is readily available to trade, which can really juice the price moves in a bull market when demand picks up. Of course, that cuts both ways in a bear market.
Right, increases volatility.
Exactly. Plus, there's just been a lot of attention and demand there. He also mentioned the technicals on the Ellis-Sumida chart looked like a breakout, suggesting Sui might continue to outperform Solana.
Okay, Sui's one. What about Ethereum?
ETH, he thinks, has potential for a significant move too, especially if it can break that $4,300 level, that previous high. He kind of sees ETH as the Microsoft of crypto. It's like the operating system, right?
Yeah.
Huge developer base, institutions like it, especially banks.
And the layer 2s on ETH.
Yeah, he mentioned those are attractive to banks. They feel like they get some control, but still have the finality of the main Ethereum chain, the layer 1. So ETH could surprise to the upside and potentially pull along other correlated assets, things like XRP and maybe even Doge.
Interesting mix there. What about NFTs? Is there another NFT season coming?
He thinks so, yeah, but maybe different from the last one. He sees a kind of split happening. On one hand, you've got the Web3 consumer brands, doodles, pudgy penguins, that sort of thing. Then you have the pure art, and then the PFPs, the profile pictures.
Within PFPs, any specific calls?
He threw out a potentially wild number for CryptoPunks, maybe a $500,000 floor price eventually.
Yeah.
Driven by that sustained OG interest. He mentioned the Sui Foundation buying one as an example. He also flagged Crypto Dick Butts as another maybe undervalued OG project with potentially significant upside.
Okay, the OGs. What else?
The Lindy effect. Basically, projects that have been around and survived tend to do well in the next cycle. Xcopy, People, certain generative artists, some PFPs. He pointed to Xcopy's ecosystem as a good model, offering different assets at various price points.
Makes sense.
And looking forward, he sees potential for real innovation, combining memes and actual NFT tech, utility beyond just being a picture. We're also seeing NFT activity migrate, Solana and Sui are getting traction because they're faster, but ETH is still a major player.
And he mentioned NFTs having a kind of multiplier effect.
Yeah, like a call option on the underlying chain. So if ETH goes up 4x, maybe NFTs on ETH double on top of that, giving you an 8x total return from the start. And for some of the lower-priced established NFTs, he mentioned Meebits, Crypto Dick Butts again. Maybe the multiplier could be even higher, like 5x or 10x on top of the chain's move.
So potential leverage there.
Right. And he kind of sees the fact that many people still dislike or don't get NFTs as a bit of a contrarian indicator. Often the things people dismiss are where the opportunities lie.
Interesting take. Finally, he zoomed out to the really long-term picture. Wealth creation and art.
Yeah, this is his big macro thesis. The crypto space growing from, say, $3 trillion now towards maybe $100 trillion over the next decade. That's just massive potential wealth creation.
100 trillion, wow.
Right. And historically, when you see that kind of wealth being generated, a significant chunk eventually finds its way into art. It becomes a major store of value for the super rich, beyond just houses and other assets.
So digital art could see huge inflows.
That's the expectation. He anticipates we'll see record prices for digital artists like Xcopy in the future as this wealth gets recycled.
And related to that, token economies around IP.
He touched on that. Acknowledged it's still very experimental, people trying things like Doodles or Listeners Project. The big challenge is creating, sustainable token economies that have real utility, not just airdrops that get dumped immediately.
That's a tough nut to crack.
It really is.
Yeah.
But he stressed how important it is to solve this. If someone figures it out, it could unlock huge value in the creator economy, for sports teams, brands, everything. He's optimistic someone will crack the code eventually.
Okay, so quite a comprehensive outlook from Raoul. To quickly recap the key points for everyone listening. Looks like potential for continued market upside in the near term, maybe into July, driven mainly by liquidity, followed by a possible correction around August.
And anticipating altcoins to outperform as Bitcoin dominance peaks, signaling an alt season. Specific mentions for assets like Sui and ETH.
right? Plus a potential revival in the NFT market may be structured a bit differently this time, focusing on OGs, art, and utility.
And then that huge long-term picture. Transformative wealth creation in crypto, potentially flowing into digital art, and the eventual rise of working token economies.
It really underscores the importance of looking beyond just the day-to-day narratives and understanding these uh, deeper market dynamics.
Absolutely. Which kind of leads to a final thought, maybe something for you to chew on. If this massive wealth creation projection holds true, even partially, and a lot of it does flow into digital assets, what are the areas within that digital space, maybe as specific types of art or utility tokens we haven't even conceived of yet, that are currently being overlooked but could become truly significant stores of value down the road? What are those less obvious opportunities hiding in plain sight?
That's a great question to ponder. Really fascinating analysis today. Thanks for breaking it all down. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this deep dive on the Market Chronicles. We'll catch you on the next one.